Let's start off with just a list of stuff you guys want to know about aerospace medicine. Weird stuff that might show up in a story, awesome scenes that you would want to write, and we can talk about the science behind it. I'll start us off. Everybody wants to talk about what happens when you get sucked out the airlock.
Bone decalcification.
Okay. This one, sucked out in the airlock, just sounds good, but I had this student when I was teaching high school biology wore the shirt that said, "Science never sucks." It was all the reasons, all the forces at work that are actually happening when we think something is sucking. Like when you suck in air, your diaphragm's contracting, you're lowering the pressure, and it's the gravity of Earth pulling the air down, and there's low pressure, so it goes in there. So it's the same thing, you're getting blown out of the airlock, it sucks down. Anybody else? Okay, how about barotrauma is a good one. That kind of ties into getting sucked out in an airlock.
What about aerospace, ramjet, scramjet technology?
That I don't know a whole lot about.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're talking medical aerospace.
Yeah, medical's the
sorry.
focus.
Yeah.
Immunology. That's a fun one. I'm going to spoil the ending here, and the summary is microgravity will kill you. It's creepy, all the stuff that it does. The next time you trip and fall, I think, oh, it's okay. Gravity saved my life, even though I look like an idiot for everybody. Well, let's talk about what it does to your cardiovascular system. Different aspects of human space. And these overlap a little bit. Embryology and women's health. And not as in women's health needs to be this extra topic that we put on, as in non-man, and all this else is men's health stuff. It's just ties in with embryology, and it's some of it is you think, oh, this is going to be so cool, and it's no. Which leads to there's all the whole space tourism thing, and all NASA flatly denies it, even though there have been married couples on shuttle missions that there's been nothing going on. I don't know. I was a married couple in space. The 200-mile high club, you gotta try. You know? Or as an author in an Outside magazine once put it in an article researching this, and some private groups trying to do research on the parabolic flight things. Some really funny movements like the 0G spot. Cosmic boing boing. So let's start. And how I want to do this is we're going to put it into the actual way we're going to be using it in creating a story. Yeah?
But are you looking at a particular time frame of the story? Or how long people are up in the story?
Yeah, we'll talk about what happens in short term, long term. Okay. What was your name?
Melvin.
Melvin, welcome. Okay, we need a protagonist. I'm kind of thinking heroine. So a name and where's she from?
You want from work or do you want it from?
You guys pick.
Ari, and she...
A-R-I-E?
A-R-I.
A-R-I.
And let's make her from Utah.
Okay. I'm going to say Logan just because,
That works.
you know, that's...
I was going to say Leverkin.
I think I'm putting Logan.
So what's the inciting event that's going to create a story for her?
Actually, she's a med tech, and they're starting a ship to exploratory, deep space explorer.
For the purposes of our discussion here, we're going to assume there's no artificial gravity that has been invented yet, so we've got to use the technology we have right now, because otherwise we could not talk about the cool stuff.
She breaks up with her boyfriend and needs to get away from Earth.
I like it.
He's just that awful.
That breakup is so bad, she has to leave the whole planet. Okay, so medtech, it sounds like you're familiar with health stuff.
Not totally, but yeah.
Okay, so what are her responsibilities as a medtech on this voyage?
Nutrition, actually just the whole medical.
Health maintenance?
Yeah.
We call it working in the primary care, because this is deep space, this is going to be a long voyage. Okay, so she is in health maintenance. So a little about my background. I was a high school biology teacher for a while, and then I went back to school, became a physician assistant, and I've been doing that for 7 years, 8 years. I was in primary care for a while. Did a little bit of surgery. Not the really cool surgeries, because it was with a podiatrist, but it was still surgery, so it was really awesome. Cutting wedges out of people's bones and then bending in. Now I just do urgent care, which is mostly runny noses. I think that's boring. It's not. It's okay. Occasionally you get broken bones or somebody comes in. I think I'm having a heart attack. You search into the wrong place. We call the ambulance and send them off. Don't have to worry about anybody dying. It's very nice. So, essentially that's what she's going to be. She's in a deep space mission. She's going to be the primary care office, the specialist, the emergency department, all that stuff. So she's going to see all these things. So, let's talk about some of the things that they're going to run into. Let's talk about, select out an airlock. Let's do that one. So if you think about people familiar with the bends, with diving, you go down and there's no problems as you go down as long as you're clearing your ears. And what's happening is all of the air that's in your tank is being compressed by the water, even though it's surrounded by that iron tank that comes out of there. And so that compressed air is what's being dissolved into the bloodstream. No problems, everything's happy. Sometimes you can even get what's called nitrogen narcosis, which is different than the bends. And that's where you get little nitrogen bubbles, and some people describe it as being high or floaty, happy. And sometimes they get so happy they forget what they're doing and they run out of oxygen and they have a happy smile on their face. But with the bends, the problem is when you come back up and you release that pressure, and it's just like when you're popping your knuckles, that gas comes out of solution in the synovial fluid, or when you crack the top of the soda. So with deep space, or with 0G, and outer space, the vacuum, so with diving we're going from 1G to what becomes more like 2Gs because of the pressure, not on your whole body, but on the air. So when you go to 0Gs, you're having the opposite problem. So the pressure in the suits tries to recreate the normal 1 atmosphere of pressure. So if there is a leak, then it's similar to what happens when you're coming up from depth in. So what that, let's draw a picture of, we'll draw a picture of our, not because she's going to have all the bad stuff happen to her. She's a heroine, so she gets a picture up here. She's happy because she's getting away from what's his face. It's just so I can put organs and stuff in there where they go. There's a mission patch. All right, so if we zoom in and look at like a capillary bed, you've got the arterioles splitting off into capillaries, such that you have every cell of your body within 1 cell or 2 from the capillaries, so that you get oxygen, nutrients, and get waste eliminated. Then it goes to the veins. And so what's been studied and found is that there's no bubbles that show up in the blood after decompression sickness. and it doesn't show up inside the cells themselves. And so this can't be measured because there's no tool to do it. But the only remaining spot that is fluid in the body is the extracellular space. So if we do another zoom in, here are your skin cells, and this is, or muscle cells, or liver cells, or whatever. You're getting all the little bubbles in there. As pressure continues to drop relative to the pressure of those bubbles, it can compress the capillaries, and so you got a section of tissue where there's no blood flow in there. Or it can, that's in the capillaries or in the afferent arteriole coming to it. If you got those bubbles swelling up afterward, then everything's still getting oxygen, still getting nutrients, but waste can't get away, and more importantly, fluid can't get away. And so it's going to happen to get this swelling effect. And it's really similar to what you see with someone with congestive heart failure. On the right side of their heart isn't pumping fast enough to keep up with the blood coming back to it, and their legs swell. And it's not a swelling like that's fat. You push on it and it goes away. You push on it for 10 seconds, like right over the shin, and you move your fingers, and there's still these dents in their skin because you squeezed all that tissue out. So when you have that blood flow cut off, you're going to start to get tissue that dies. So the fix for that is you got to get the pressure back to where it was. There's not a lot of data on astronauts because everybody's really safe and it's been great. So most of the data comes from studying sailors in the Navy, in submarines, and diving accidents. So what you got to do is get the pressure back to where these bubbles are a manageable size or gone, and then slowly release the pressure at a rate where the fluid can dissolve that gas before it gets big enough to cause any trouble. So, learning that science, that's going to tell us something about what R is going to do, and it's going to give us a whole bunch of cool plot stuff, right? So she's going to have to know how to run, learn about decompression sickness, and that might be her job, is to run the chambers. And let's talk about what that does, the barotrauma, what's going on in the lungs. So if that happens there, the tissue is really thin. If you were to take cadaver lungs out and spread them out so it's one cell thick, all the surface area of all the alveoli that take in the oxygen, give out carbon dioxide, and you spread it out on the floor, it's a whole basketball court, like full size. Every time you breathe in, you take a full breath, you're spreading oxygen and nitrogen from the air across that entire surface area. And you can pull it all into the blood. It blows me away. And then that whole amount of air coming back out. So that's a lot of really teeny bubbles. And they're easily ruptured. If they do break, then you're going to get spots in the lungs. These are pink. So if you zoom in on some lung tissue, like here's the alveoli, and the cells are kind of like this. So if these rupture, then you're going to have a bunch of break here, or you might have alveoli next to each other, and they rupture, and then you've lost this surface area right here, and sometimes that can be permanent. That's what you see with chronic smoking, or somebody who's lived through lots of Salt Lake Valley inversion injuries. So now you don't have a full basketball court to pull air in. And if you think about what the normal human being can do, go up a flight of stairs, back down, maybe you're breathing a little bit hard. You cut that in half, you get to the top of the stairs and you're done. You can't keep the oxygen level in your blood high enough to function how you need to. So, how can we take this information? What's more plot stuff that we could use now that we've got some science behind it?
What was the impetus for the reduced lung capacity?
If you get the bubbles in the interstitial fluid rupturing tissue, you're going to have reduced surface area in your lungs. Oh, the other thing I forgot is then you can get interstitial fluid leaking into the alveoli. So if you got a fluid level here like this, then you're at like a quarter of the typical surface area.
Can you cough that out? Or?
Yeah, you can. And I hear that quite a bit during cold and flu season. I'll stick my stethoscope on somebody's back, have them take a deep breath, and you hear this little squeak. And then they breathe out, and they breathe in again, and it's gone. And what that is the surface tension of water creates this little meniscus of fluid. And when they're breathing normally, there's not enough of a low pressure from the diaphragm contracting to allow the atmospheric pressure to push in there hard enough. But then when they take a deep breath, that pressure raises enough that it pops, breaks the surface tension of the fluid, and then it surrounds like this, and then it's thin enough that the oxygen and the carbon dioxide can pass through there.
So your question was how can we use this, right?
Yeah, looking at this, the bubbles, the lung capacity changes. What are some ways that might come into our plot characterization?
So you have like a spacecraft repair or the micrometeoroid impact or anything that can cause a partial decompression in any section of your spacecraft, then you've got characters or people that you care about that have these issues that can't fulfill their job functions. So you have some conflict there. Maybe one or two of those characters are involved in an EVA, something happens to their spacesuit. They get them in quick, but you're not supposed to depressurize that quick, obviously. So then you've got job functions on the spacecraft that aren't being fulfilled.
So we have some kind of a decompression event. Because if this is going to come into play, you got to make something happen to get it there. And so now, where did the meteoroid come from? Is it from low Earth orbit, or are they somewhere else?
So if you're going from like an action story kind of thing, it's a micrometeoroid. If you're going for like the thriller aspect in your science fiction, depends on your theme, then it's caused by another person on the ship.
Sabotage.
It was a sabotage. They wanted to take over the captain's duties or the chief extravehicular officer's duties or whatever. So you could go in a couple different ways. Is the cause human, or is the cause, nature, or spacecraft malfunction? Maybe, there's a specific part manufactured by somebody back home, the boyfriend, for example.
Oh, tying it in, backstory.
He knew she'd be on this ship. He worked for, the EVA suit manufacturer, and he created pinholes in each of the gloves, hoping to nail her, but wasn't smart enough to know that she's not the EVA officer. She's just the help officer or whatever it is.
There you go.
I actually kind of like that one. The boyfriend is trying to make her life difficult by getting all the crew members sick.
Yeah, that's pretty harsh getting back. I like it. So just leads into all this other stuff. Or another option could be, what if it was her fault, something she did accidentally? Or what if she, through not having her skills down as she should, or just because this can be drastic and nobody could save the day, somebody dies, and then she's got guilt, deserved or not. So it leads us to some cool things. And then, having that science down, you can write that accurately. What this would look like on somebody getting back into the spacecraft, if it's dermal, pushing on the skin is going to feel crackly, kind of like Rice Krispies. And for a different cause, I got to see that one time. This gentleman came to the surgery clinic when I was there as a student, and I gave him his pre-op physical, and he was all good to go to have his inguinal hernias repaired, hit one on the left and right. So then I was done with that rotation and was in the emergency department. I didn't think anything of it because I was disappointed he didn't help with the surgery. But instead of coming back in a week for his post-op physical, he went to the Philippines to see family, and he stayed there for 3 weeks. And just kept taking ibuprofen because his abdomen hurt. And he comes back and he said, "It's kind of hurting." And so the surgeon pushes on his stomach, Rice Krispies. He freaks out and panics. So again, this is a different cause than this, but it was air bubbles in the skin, only this time it was caused from anaerobic bacteria. He had gangrene in his inguinal region from the surgery because he didn't come back in and have it checked. Who knows what he was doing in the Philippines, but so they called the emergency department and they said, "Open up all the doors between here and the emergency department and just get everybody out of the way." And they got him off and they were just running. I called the surgeon. I said, "Do you mind if I scrub in with you on this one?" He says, "Yeah, just don't get in the way." So I got to go in. The whole time he's sitting up in the gurney as we're running down the hall, saying, "I'm okay, can I just have some ibuprofen?" I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna die." So what you have to do is expose all that tissue to oxygen. And once it's infected, it's not valid anymore. So that surgeon had to take this guy's skin off all the way down to the muscle, from the top of his pubic bone all the way up to his ribs and all the way out to his sides. He's just peeling it off, and I'm standing there thinking, "Oh my gosh!" And every once in a while I see this little spatter of blood over here. I'm like, "Where's that coming?" Oh, I'm going to stick my finger on this little squirter of blood until the other surgeon could get the pottery thing and burn it closed. So, looking up some stories about this, because you can find them with naval stuff, and getting some details on the story, and you can integrate that into what's going on. Okay, so we got the sucked out an airlock. Talk about barotrauma. What's next?
On the subject of being sucked out of an airlock, there's 3 things that have happened to humans. 2 were in NASA decompression chambers where they were practicing spacesuits.
Yeah, tell us about that one.
The first one, the guy spacesuit malfunction decompressed. He was exposed to the vacuum.
Was it like 3 minutes or something before they got
No,
him?
it was less than a minute. He passed out real quick. They restored pressure and he regained consciousness and he was fine. He said that he remembered feeling the saliva on his tongue boiling.
Do you remember his name?
I don't know his name.
I think this was 70s?
Yeah, it was 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
Then there was a second one, and same sort of accident, but this guy died. So they know about. They know when you're exposed to vacuum suddenly, you've got about 10 seconds where you're conscious, and then by 30 to 45 seconds, your heart's still beating, but there's no way to save you. So you're dead by 30 seconds.
Yeah, you don't do the Arnold Schwarzenegger on Mars thing where your eyes bulge out. The body tissue is strong enough that it will stay intact. And as in the studies, they've not ever found bubbles in the blood, in interstitial fluid. What they have found with submarines and having to evacuate from there, if you hold your breath, you're toast. All of that air in your lungs that's compressed is not going to expand and hold it in there. That's very tender tissue. It fractures, ruptures really, really easily. So you exhale the whole time. So I'm making the extrapolation that in a vacuum space situation would be similar.
The third thing that happened was the guy who did the highest skydive. His glove malfunctioned, and he didn't tell anyone because they knew they'd aborted. So he spent a couple hours with his hand exposed to space, basically. And he said it hurt like heck. He couldn't move it. When he got down and took his glove off, his hand was black, and all swollen up, and he couldn't move anything. But it went back to normal in a couple hours. The coloring didn't go back to normal for a few days or weeks.
Yeah, it's some pretty serious capillary rupture and blood out into there.
But no,
You're gonna have like red blood cell rupture too.
in his case, no permanent damage.
Cool. I did not know those other two stories. Let's talk about some microgravity stuff. What's been discovered so far let's talk about the bones and the muscles. One of the things that gravity does is it triggers the osteoblasts in your bones to take in calcium and build new cells. And you got these other cells called osteoclasts, and they do the opposite, is they break down the calcium structure of the bones and release it into the bloodstream. So without gravity, you're not having that stimulus, and the osteoclasts are working harder. So blood levels of calcium go up. They haven't seen that in a level that's going to cause something problematic. But it's severe enough that they send astronauts up, fit human beings, really great shape, and they're giving them bisphosphonate medication, which is the same thing I used to give to little old ladies whose bones were frail, so that they would stop getting more frail. So, here, Lieutenant Colonel, tough guy, I want you to take this old lady medication. And I wish I could see the faces of those astronauts when they first started telling them what they're going to give them.
They don't frame it that way.
Yes, I'm sure they would know. Another thing that happens is deep tendon reflexes, the kind where you take the load off of your leg and you tap the patellar tendon and it jerks. That triggers a nerve signal that goes to your spine and back to your muscles. Your brain's not consulted at all. So those decrease. One of the thoughts is it might be the calcium thing going on. After about a 14-day mission in microgravity, it takes about 30 to 60 minutes before astronauts are able to ambulate really well. And they found anybody that's over a month in space, even with the 2.5 hours a day of exercise that's worked into the astronaut schedule, it can take several hours before they can stand on their own. You guys may have seen the pictures of the Russian cosmonauts where they're carrying them on a blanket out of their spaceship. It's not quite the heroic return to Earth that you want, but that's what microgravity does to you. And with with the heart, there's a lot of orthostatic hypotension that happens. And what that is as your body position changes, your cardiovascular system can't compensate. So if we draw this on this arm, so we got the heart here. And if we zoom in on, like a renal artery over here, there are muscles that surround all the arteries in your body, not the veins. And they're under control of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So they can be tightened up, relaxed. Part of what happens when somebody scares you really bad, like my dad did once when I was a kid, is that the sympathetic nervous system shuts off. And so that stimulus to keep that contracted opens up, and now your 5 liters of blood is in a 6-liter container, and so this part empties out, and your vision goes, you can't hear, and down you go. The other thing that happens is there's a little bit of change in the left ventricle mass of the heart. Just a quick rundown on how the heart works. Blood comes into the right side of the heart, into the atria, then the ventricle, and then it gets pumped out to the lungs. And then it comes back to the lungs, into the left atria, and the left ventricle is the biggest, beefiest part of the heart. If you take a cross-section of it, it's kind of round like this. So this is all cardiac muscle. And then right here is the right ventricle. So it doesn't have to pump our low pressure system, but this gets bigger trying to compensate for that low blood pressure. Because what's also been found is that when you get into space, there's a fluid shift that goes to the head because there's not gravity pulling all the fluid down, and this tone of the arteries is higher down in the legs to keep that blood up in your head where it's most needed. So that disappears, and it's about a liter of fluid that shifts upward. And so if you look at pictures of astronauts on the ground and in space, they've got these baby faces up in space because it fills out. Some of them talk about their prescription changing just a little bit. So you have that liter of fluid shifting.
Yeah, their vision change. That's what you mean by prescription, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not a whole lot. Some of them just need some reading glasses because instead of reading something here, they've got to hold it out there and it gets annoying. But then when you come back to Earth, well, before that, this gets into more of the cardiovascular stuff and the bone decalcification. Is that fluid shift triggers some of the baroreceptors. You got two of them in your carotid arteries, and they just are pressure sensors essentially. And that's the kind of the theory behind the throat punch. Is if you hit those baroreceptors real hard, it will trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, and those arteries all open up and the blood goes down and takes the way down. How well that works in real life, I don't know, you have to talk to one of the melee combat guys. But that increase of fluid here also, it triggers those baroreceptors, and that causes a change in the hormones and the pressure inside the kidneys. We'll go on the kidney over here. So if you look in the kidney, the functional unit of it has a capillary coming in, and then all this mesh network of capillaries, and then it goes out. And this thing here is called Bowman's capsule. And anything that can fit through in between the cells of the capillaries does. So you're losing water and electrolytes and all your sugar, but what stays in, proteins don't cross there unless there's some kidney damage, and cells don't cross through there. And then you've got this loop mechanism, which is kind of cool. I used to do research with a professor in Calgary on how that all works. So it made me realize I don't want to be a professor because 12 hours a day in a basement lab in Calgary analyzing sheep urine gets old after a couple of weeks. Not to mention if it's in the winter, then you got to worry about seasonal affective disorder. Because if I didn't go upstairs for lunch, sun comes up at 10, goes down at 3, so no sun for a week. Try functioning with that. Didn't work. So then what your body does is it pulls out everything that you need, and the rest, anything that's here, is on its way to the bladder, and can't do anything about it then. So what happens is you get relaxation of those arteries, constriction of those arteries, relaxation of those, and so there's more pressure going this way, and then it inhibits some of the reabsorption of water, and so this extra liter of fluid that goes up ends up into the kidneys, and then you pee it out, and it's gone. So they're operating at about a liter short on total blood. Their red blood cells and white blood cells number stays the same for the first while in orbit. And in trauma, any blood loss, they do different classes for hemorrhage injuries. And class 1 is about 15% blood loss, which is that right there. So if these guys are in a trauma setting, they would call it class 1 trauma.
Immediately.
What's that?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So then when they get back to Earth, that can cause problems because they try to get up and function, and that's also part of that orthostatic hypotension thing. So while we're on the kidneys, another interesting thing that happens is what triggers red blood cell formation is a hormone from the kidneys. I don't know what cells produce it, but kidneys, that's close enough. It's called erythropoietin. It's shortened to called EPO. And it got synthesized, I think in the 70s or 80s. They figured out how to make it. And so people with red blood cell disorders, they had chronic anemia, because their bone marrow wasn't cranking out enough red blood cells, they could inject that, and their bone marrow would start working, and now their percentage of their blood that is red blood cells is back up to normal, and they can carry enough oxygen from the lungs to their cells so that they can function. And then, of course, the professional cyclists heard about that. Ding! And then that was one of the first cheats that they would do, is they would give EPO to people with normal hematocrit, which is that percentage of red blood cells, and then it would pump it up. It actually killed one cyclist because it was on one of the mountain climb stages. I can't remember his name, but he was on EPO, so his, instead of around 45% for a typical male, I think his hematocrit was up around 55%, which meant he could move oxygen like crazy, and he was an animal. And he climbed the French Alps like an animal, but he didn't drink enough water, and he was sweating. And so it really replicated the same thing that astronauts have going on, only taking it a step further. And so because the red blood cells are so small relative to the water that's going on, it doesn't function like silt or particulates. It makes it, becomes more like how thickening syrup or honey or sugar would function. So he got to the top, crossed the finish line, stopped, and had a heart attack and died. And because he had sweated off a bunch of that water, and he was pumping syrup. And your heart can't do that. So that one lost favor, because it worked great, but the health risks were too bad. So how this applies here, if you're in a long-term deep space mission where you're trying to forget your romantic problems of the past. While we're talking about the heart, that's fitting.
Died of a broken heart.
Erythropoietin goes to the pelvis is one of the big places where it's produced. It's not the best pelvis I've ever gone. They've been in space too long. The cranium, ends of the long bone sometimes. So if your kidneys are secreting less erythropoietin, then there's less of it going to the bone marrow, and so then your red blood cell concentration goes down. And red blood cells last about 90 to 120 days in the bloodstream, and then the spleen chews them up, recycles them, because from an evolutionary standpoint, getting a hold of iron is super hard to do, and so you don't ever let go of it. So the cell itself gets destroyed, and the heme molecule that has the iron in it gets chopped up, but then recycled iron. But as the mission progresses, you can see in a mission of a week or two, nothing's really going to change. Erythropoietin can start to come down, red blood cell production can slow down, but you still have all your normal amount, and over the course of a week, it's not going to make much of a difference. But if you're one of those cosmonauts that they first put up in space forever, and they come back down, then your red blood cell quantity is dropping a little bit every day. So then you come to Earth, and in addition to your sympathetic nervous system being all weird and you being dehydrated, now you also are anemic, and there's just not enough fluid, and there's not enough oxygen carrying capacity, and it carries pulmonary benefit. So from this, we could look at a couple of other fun things with our story here. Look at red blood cells. They're going to need a blood bank, right? So maybe that's something that she's in charge of also. So now we have all these fun options of, could somebody do something to the blood supply.
If there's a vampire on board.
Yes, we could turn it into a cross-genre mashup. That's right. I have stolen all of your blood. It was delicious. So somebody's messing with this, and maybe if you get blamed for it, is she a weird somnambulist? A somnambulist vampire? How's that?
Her boyfriend stowed away on the ship.
Oh,
and he's a vampire. He was on the outside, and him coming in caused a decompression incident.
This is so cool. Now I want to read this as a graphic novel. That would be awesome.
Our telescopes are mirror-based, so space vampires are really hard to see.
Oh, good point. That would be like one of the coolest lines in the whole book. What did the scientists say?
Wait, say it again.
Our best telescopes are mirror-based, so space vampires are really hard to see.
You got the time?
It's 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Let's talk about embryology and women's health in a quick summary, and then we'll do questions until they kick us out. Sally Ride was asked on her first mission, she's going to be in space for a week, and one of the NASA rocket scientists said, you need your feminine hygiene products, and he's got this box, and he said, for 7 days, 100? Will that be enough? And she says, you can probably cut that in half. I don't know what the expression on her face was, but she said you could cut that in half. That was one of the reasons that women were initially excluded from the space program. And finally, some of the women in the astronaut program said, look, we don't know if it's a problem, stop treating it like a problem. If it becomes a problem, we can deal with it then. And turns out it's not a problem at all. Microgravity has no effect on menstruation. There's no reverse flow through the fallopian tubes out into the peritoneal cavity. No problem whatsoever. Childbirth is something that is a complete and total unknown. There's a lot of good data on rats that are impregnated on Earth. They fly on space shuttle with controls on Earth, and they come back down. The only difference in the rats is that the rats who gestated in microgravity have twice as many contractions as the rats who gestated on Earth. So I'm thinking that's pretty good. Just radiation, all the other stuff, just the contractions, never had to experience them but watch them. Gestate on Earth. There was a difference also. There's a really fun part of how the inner ear works that we don't have time for, but the embryo, a lot of what normal gestation is similar to microgravity anyway. And you're spinning around, and so the little semilunar canals in your ear are functioning normally. But there's another part of the inner ear that is activated when you move your head down like this, and move it up like this. There's little microscopic rocks that slide across these hairs. And the rats that flew, or that gestated in space, little baby pups, they had problems with vertical issues. And you see that in human beings also. Also contributes to this not being able to walk well in space. If you're in microgravity and you go like this, nothing happens. It's not triggering that section of the inner ear. If you push yourself off the bulkhead real fast, that will, because inertia is still at work. The little microscopic rocks tend to stay where they are, and so they trigger those hairs. So when astronauts get back to Earth and they do this, they have this sensation of somebody's jerked the carpet this way, and they move back suddenly, and it's pretty disconcerting, as I understand. And some of those things can be permanent with some different species that, non-mammalian species that are gestated and developed in space. Anybody have any questions?
They have orientation issues, like fruit flies having trouble flying.
Yes.
I read something on that, but.
And so they would just float around because they couldn't orient. And I can't remember if it was like a horizontal or vertical axis or.
But there may have been like a magnetic component to some of this.
That's interesting. I didn't read.
I'd have to go. I don't know where I read it.
So if this kind of stuff that's interesting to you, just some things to look up. The radiation is a consideration. And then the inner ear. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I had so much fun reading and geeking out over all this. And everybody at work in some downtime, they thought I was reading stuff for work. No other questions then? Yes.
So pretty much everything Karen's left side of the board, artificial gravity would take care of most of those things.
Yeah, it ruins your bones, ruins your ears. We didn't talk about the immune system, but your white blood cells stop functioning. And the air in a spacecraft is about 10 times as many particulates as an operating room. And so you're breathing in a bunch of more junk. Your immune system's not there to handle it. Messes up your cardiovascular system, your unborn children aren't going to be happy. I didn't get what a big deal exercise is in space. 2.5 hours? Holy smokes, you guys training for the Iron Man or something? But no, it's to keep, and it doesn't even work to maintain status quo. If some of this stuff is permanent if you're in space over a month, so like if you're a professional athlete, you want to spend a month in space, your professional career is over. You're going to be a fully functional, happy person, but you've lost whatever edge you have. You're never going to get that.
Your intracranial pressure or your eyesight changes.
Yeah, there's some of that that goes on too.
But the radiation stuff isn't covered by the artificial gravity.
That's correct. So I think your question at the beginning, did that get answered?
Yeah.
It did, okay. Well, thank you all very much. Hope this was useful. I've got I'm on a couple of panels Friday and then one Saturday, and then I'll be at the book signing Friday night. Thank you very much.